in jewelry making. You've exhibited nationally and internationally, and you currently use jewelry to explore the problem of plastic waste in our global system. Over to you. And if you like the mic, we want.
Let's start. Okay. There are a number of recurring themes within my work, as well as numerous levels of interpretation. But for tonight's purposes, I will focus on upcycling, sprouting, and the dichotomy of worth and waste, which has preoccupied my work for over 10 years. Someone once said of my work, it's like haute couture meets five and dime, which I love because it's going ahead like you said it wouldn't. So I love this idea because although I use what many people would consider inferior materials, I combine them with traditional techniques and/or precious metals, and all are one of a kind. In 2001, I moved back to Vancouver, happy to be near the ocean again with its beaches and tide pools. I started researching the origins of kitsch, the Victorian interest in marine life, but also bouquets of artificial flowers, the kind you come across in thrift stores, many of which were the epitome of kitsch. I worried that no one would buy them, and these sad, dusty offerings would just end up in a landfill. Au bonheur des dames, translation, to the lady's happiness, combined semi-precious stones with small nodules of plastic and originally resembled sea anemones. I saved many a bouquet and now have a bin of petals for some future project. All these plastic bouquets got me thinking about how much plastic gets produced and where does it all end up. In 2003, I went to dispose of this empty tube of eye makeup remover, having just watched a documentary on plastic and how a huge percentage of what we think is recyclable is not in fact recycled. The technology in many sorting depots can differentiate bottles and cans, but a high percentage of plastic ends up in the landfill because it could not be sorted efficiently and/or profitably. There was no recycling symbol on this tube, and I suddenly realized that even that was no guarantee that it wouldn't wind up in the landfill. So I took a good look at it, thought it was quite beautiful, translucent blue with fine white text in both official languages. So for the next few years, I started saving my empties and those of friends and colleagues, and began the work on the crossword series. Slicing the tubes into strips meant I could create new forms while preserving the embedded text. On the far right, you'll see that original tube turned into a brooch. Playing with the language of advertising and often lifting titles directly from the embedded text allowed me to touch on a broader topic of imposed beauty standards, the pressure to look a certain way, where authenticity is discarded and the plasticization of identity promotes unattainable expectations. If you note that the shape of the brooch resembles an aperture, suggesting a means of refocusing. Sprouting. So it's a frequent theme within my work. I'm always struck by how something can grow in such inhospitable places. And I love that visual metaphor. No matter how difficult, life carries on. Ugly beautiful. Besides the fact that I have a tendency to anthropomorphize everything. So with the tangle rings, I cut tiny plastic flowers out of an empty Vim container, an abrasive cleaning product. They seem to have a little life of their own. To me, their sprouting was reminiscent of the way grass or flowers find a way to grow in inhospitable places. I came across a 5-foot diameter buoy, just sitting on the side of a trail on Passage Island, obviously damaged in some kind of explosion. This buoy had become dislodged from its anchor and consequently became floating garbage before finding its way to shore. That triggered the buoys. So this recent body of work, I was inspired by their diversity in color, shape, and function. I began incorporating rope and fishing line with my silver hollow forms and spent hours studying books on knots. And I believe that Swimming Boy's Little Sister is actually owned by somebody in the audience here tonight. I used iconic nautical markers to convey safety and direction, representing the markers of civilization, but clinging to them are plastics that I'd reshaped or heated to resemble seaweed or lichen as a metaphor for the damaging effects of plastic debris in our oceans. Note there's some sprouting lichen. Although I was still working with my collection of empty beauty product packaging, my research of single-use plastic had led me to the Pacific Vortex, a swirling mass of plastic fragments in varied stages of decay, estimated to be the size of Texas. Which brings us to the Pacific Rim National Park. In 2011, my partner Michelle and I spent 4 very damp, drizzly days camping and collecting tiny fragments of plastic on Long Beach. In the ocean, plastic slowly breaks down via UV rays, as well as the constant churning in the currents, and ultimately, the waves shatter it further when it reaches the shore. The image on the right shows in detail the plastic looks. It's like brightly colored confetti scattered along the highest point of the tide line. So, back home, with a lot of plastic, we began cleaning and sorting them into color and size, starting with the bigger pieces and gradually working down to tiny fragments. In this way, I am only just starting work on this mass collection of plastic. Starting monochromatically, I created earrings titled skewer stacks, taking a heat gun to some, those orange ones, and leaving the other ones rough but graduated. The next pair, these are my favorites. I can't begin to tell you how long it takes to create a pair of earrings that are different, but without doubt, a pair from plastic garbage. It's like any relationship, finding that sweet balance doesn't come without some struggle. I was feeling that I hadn't spent enough time with my beach fragments, as this is not my full-time gig. So for the current exhibition at Pearson Airport, I decided to start with some synthetic rope that we collected along the shore that same visit. They all have personalities of their own, and it seemed to be a project I could get into. Note there's some sprouting happening, and more sprouting. There's a little arm that goes up and down. Tumbling through the ocean, weathering the elements, the knots are all that remain of these utilitarian cast-offs. The extender arm with pearl is made from the same empty Vim bottle that created the tiny flowers on the tangle rings. This organic-looking piece is actually all that remains of a knot tied in a white plastic bag. As approximately 80% of the garbage in our oceans originated on land, I ponder their history and want to elevate their position from trash, to emphasize what I find so captivating about them, as well as bringing attention to this massive problem in our global ecosystem. Washed Ashore with Love is an ironic representation challenging traditional notions of material hierarchy. Silver poses as 24-karat gold, and plastic rope masquerades as a precious gem. It's important to me to seek out the positive. I literally mine my own raw materials. I turn consumer cast-offs into wearable pieces. This final piece is a collaboration with glass artist Maria Keating. Our work together started during a visit to her studio to see her marvelous glass comets. I noticed on her bench these intriguing gray half-spheres contained in a Ziploc bag. They were the resist remnants from, you can maybe see on the bottom, but the lights are a bit bright. They're the resist remnants from the sandblasting process. As an avid collector of discarded objects, I asked if I could have these little gray nubbins, and she graciously complied. And this officially sealed our future work together. I love that she didn't just trash them in the nearest bin. How do we stop it? Because I'm not quite finished.
Go back with...
You think it will just stop?
Hopefully.
If it goes, I'll go back. Yeah, so I actually have that piece here tonight if you wanted to check it out, because it's on its way to the Design Exchange in Toronto tomorrow. I'd like to thank the Vancouver Library, CCBC, Camilla for being tech savvy, and Bill Ewan for not backing down when I, out of shyness, said I didn't think he'd want me to talk.